Hey guys, tonight we're standing at the edge of a river that hasn't existed for over 100 million years. The air is heavy, thick with the slow heat of a dawn that doesn't rush. There's no birdsong here, just the occasional plop of something slipping into the water and the hum of insects practicing the same endless background track they've played for millions of sunrises. You're barefoot in the silt. It's cool at first, then warmer where the shallows have been holding yesterday's sunlight. Across the water, reeds lean, pretending not to care that something is moving just beneath the surface. You probably won't survive this, not because something's going to leap out at you, but because you're an out-of-place mammal in a time when even the plants have spines. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and your local time in the comments. I want to know who else is wandering this prehistoric morning with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first light doesn't pierce the Cretaceous River so much as it spills over it in a slow gradient, warming the mist into thin ribbons. You stand at the muddy edge, watching the surface crease in lazy arcs. That's the thing. This isn't a world of dramatic splashes or cinematic predators lunging from the depths. Here, life moves like thick syrup, every action drawn out, efficient, measured. A narrow ripple sways toward you, almost hypnotic. It's not a threat, at least not in the urgent, modern sense. This is the territory of Sarcosuchus, a semi-aquatic reptile longer than most buses, but right now you're seeing it at its calmest. Only the top of its snout breaking the surface, eyes half-lidded, body perfectly still except for the occasional tail flick to adjust its drift. You can smell the river, a mix of algae, wet earth, and something faintly metallic, like rust. This isn't clean water, not the glassy, blue kind you might picture. It's an opaque, green-brown brew that hides more than it reveals. Fish, some nearly the size of you, idle in the deeper channels, but you'll never see them clearly, just their shadows sliding over submerged logs. Mainstream historical fact. This particular river system once stretched across what is now North Africa, part of a vast wetland network larger than many modern countries. Back then, continents were still shifting, and this lowland was a slow-moving, silt-rich artery of life. Quirky tidbit. There's a decent chance you'd find patches of crocodile dung sun-drying along the bank. Not exactly glamorous, but later humans would use something similar as mosquito repellent. The air hums with heat before the sun even clears the treeline. You notice how the vegetation here grows dense at the edges but thins out near the water, like it knows not to tempt whatever waits there. Ferns droop into the shallows, their fronds swaying with each microcurrent. A dragonfly big enough to make modern ones look like toys hovers, dipping toward the water before darting back up. Historians still argue whether Sarcosuchus spent more time actively hunting in open water or simply lying in ambush along these edges. Watching it now, you suspect it didn't much matter. In a place this rich with life, all you had to do was wait. The sun finally breaks, and the mist pulls back to reveal a broad, slow river, maybe 100 meters across here. The far bank is barely visible through the shimmer of heat. Somewhere out there, other predators glide unseen, following their own patient routes. You watch the one nearest you sink slightly lower, leaving just the curve of its nostrils above the water. Every now and then, something disturbs the monotony, a distant splash, a rustle in the reeds, the sudden flicker of a fish breaking the surface. But even these feel subdued, as if the whole ecosystem has collectively agreed to conserve its energy. It's not laziness. It's survival in a climate where rushing wastes resources you can't easily replace. You glance down and notice your feet sinking deeper into the mud. It's not quicksand, more like the ground has decided to slowly claim you. A cluster of small, prehistoric amphibians scatters from the disturbance, their slick bodies vanishing into hairline cracks in the mud. If you were to stay here long enough, and you won't, this would become your rhythm, too. Waking with the first light, settling into the gentle push and pull of the current, scanning for movement without really expecting it, and feeling time stretch out until hours and minutes blur. A slow wind brushes over the water, carrying with it the faint, sour smell of decaying plant matter upstream. Somewhere, an unseen carcass is feeding dozens of smaller scavengers. The Sarcosuchus doesn't react. It doesn't need to. You watch its tail sway again, that single, lazy motion steering it toward a slightly deeper channel where the current will carry it without effort. The river takes it slowly, like it has all the time in the world, which, in a sense, it does. You trail the Sarcosuchus without meaning to, your eyes following that faint wake it leaves on the surface. The light is stronger now, pouring over the water like warm honey, catching on ripples and flashes of silver beneath. The air feels heavier, as if the morning itself is settling its weight onto your shoulders. Beneath the reeds, you glimpse the younger ones, miniatures of their titanic elders, but still the size of a large man. They don't have the bulk yet, the thick armor-plated skin, or the calm confidence of the full-grown beasts. Instead, they move in hesitant spurts, a lunge, a freeze, a sudden dart back to safety. This is where scaled ambition takes root. You watch one of them, barely a few years old, practicing patience the way other species practice speed. It hovers just under the surface, its small eyes fixed on a cluster of fish. A tail twitch here, a tiny jaw adjustment there. It's rehearsing for a life that will be defined not by chasing prey, but by outlasting it. Mainstream historical fact. Juvenile Sarcosuchus likely faced more danger from other predators than adults did. In this ecosystem, even the shadows had teeth. Spinosaurids, large theropods, and other crocodile-like species shared these waters. Survival meant keeping low, staying still, and letting the bigger ones claim the prime spots. A puff of mud blooms near the young croc's snout. The fish scatter before it can even twitch. It doesn't panic, though, just shifts sideways, almost embarrassed, and sinks lower into the darker water. You can almost hear it muttering something like, "Fine. Later." Quirky tidbit. Paleontologists once joked that juvenile Sarcosuchus were basically portable snacks for anything larger, a bit like the prehistoric equivalent of chicken wings. The nickname didn't stick, but you can see how it might have been apt. Historians still argue whether these young ones spent their first years alone or loosely clustered in safer inlets. Right now, you're seeing what looks like a cautious kind of companionship, several juveniles scattered along a stretch of submerged roots, each keeping a polite distance but staying within sight of one another. Safety in numbers, but not too many numbers. You crouch at the water's edge, the damp mud giving under your toes, and try to imagine what ambition feels like in a creature that measures time in seasons, not days. Growth here is slow and unapologetic. Each shed scale, each fraction of a meter gained, is a victory. The water shifts again. Not from the young one you've been watching, but from something larger sliding past in the deeper channel. The juveniles freeze, mouths just open enough to draw in water through their palatal valves, bodies perfectly still except for the faint pulse of their throats. It takes a long minute for the shape to pass, but when it does, you can feel the collective release, a subtle ripple as they all drift a little looser. You glance around and realize that the plants here grow in deliberate patterns, not random tangles. The reeds nearest the waterline lean outward, as if nudged repeatedly by passing bodies. The ferns farther back are undisturbed, giving you a quiet cross-section of who lives where. This is not a forest. It's a slow-growing, silt-filtering fortress. One young Sarcosuchus noses toward a basking patch, a slab of rock that's been soaking in the rising heat. But another one is already there, draped over it like a scaled throw rug. The first circles once, twice, then gives up and slides into a muddy side pool instead. You watch its eyes half close, letting the water carry it in lazy spirals. You notice something else. The stillness isn't boredom, it's the work. Every motion here, no matter how small, is rationed. A twitch, a shift, a single snap of the jaws. These are investments, and bad investments here mean losing more than just a meal. A thin breeze stirs, carrying the smell of damp stone and something faintly sulfurous from upstream. You wonder if it's from volcanic activity far off, or just the chemical stew of rotting plant matter. Either way, it belongs here, part of the sensory wallpaper of the Cretaceous morning. The juveniles begin to drift apart, each returning to its personal patch of bank or root cluster. One makes a half-hearted strike at a fish and misses entirely. It doesn't chase. The fish is already gone, and the chase would cost more than it's worth. That's the real lesson here. You don't need to be faster than your prey, just more stubborn than the river. The sun climbs higher, and for a moment the entire surface flares gold, each ripple edged in light. Somewhere nearby, an insect lands on the water and skates in wide arcs, oblivious to the eyes watching from below. You get the feeling it won't be skating for long. The sun is high enough now that the surface glare forces you to squint. The river has shifted tone, from that pale morning green to a deeper bronze where the silt and light mix into something almost metallic. You follow the slow drift of a young Sarcosuchus into the shallower margins, where the water barely covers its nostrils. It's not here to rest. It's here for lunch, though calling what's about to happen lunch is generous. This is going to take a while. The thing about hunting fish here is that it's less like a chase and more like a staring contest. You settle on your haunches in the mud, waiting with it, the heat pressing on the back of your neck. From your angle, the water is a mirror, but you can imagine what it sees below. Shadows of gar-like fish cruising slowly, their elongated bodies cutting clean lines through the murk. Mainstream historical fact. Fossil evidence shows that Sarcosuchus had a long, narrow snout packed with over 100 conical teeth, perfect for gripping slippery prey. Those teeth didn't chew, they held, they clamped, and they let the predator drag its catch into deeper water to swallow whole. The young hunter barely moves. Even the ripples around its head seem borrowed from the current rather than made by it. You think of a sniper, scope trained on a single target, knowing that firing too soon will ruin the shot. Quirky tidbit. In some modern crocodilian species, individuals have been observed balancing sticks on their snouts to lure in nesting birds looking for twigs. No one can prove Sarcosuchus did anything like that, but you can't help imagining this ancient giant floating with a bit of river debris, waiting for some prehistoric egret to make a fatal mistake. Historians still argue whether these big reptiles were pure ambush specialists or if they occasionally pursued prey over short distances. The slow, deliberate way this one works makes the second theory hard to picture, but you suppose a desperate animal can surprise you. Minutes pass. Then more minutes. The only reason you know something's about to happen is the tiniest forward shift, just a few centimeters, and then a sudden, shocking eruption of motion. Water explodes upward, the young Sarcosuchus surging forward with jaws gaping, teeth flashing white for a fraction of a second before the water swallows the scene again. When the spray settles, it's holding a fish longer than your arm. The fish thrashes, the surface breaking again and again as it's dragged toward deeper water. You can hear the wet, heavy slap of tail against water as the predator shakes its head once, twice, then disappears entirely. You exhale without realizing you'd been holding your breath. The attack wasn't cinematic, it was too fast for drama, too quick to really savor, but that's exactly the point. This isn't about spectacle. It's about the efficient, brutal math of calories in versus calories out. The hunter reappears 20 feet away, floating low, the struggling fish now limp. There's no tearing here, just a tilt of the head, a shift in the jaw, and the whole thing slides down its throat in a single, slow swallow. You can see the bulge travel down its neck before smoothing out again. You think about how much patience that meal took, and how little time it will last before the cycle begins again. Something brushes your ankle. You look down fast, but it's only a school of tiny fish darting past, each one turning in perfect synchrony, silver sides catching the light. You can't help wondering how many of them will end up swallowed by the day's end, and how many will live to dart again tomorrow. The young Sarcosuchus drifts back toward its earlier spot, as if rewinding the hunt. The mud plume from its attack still hangs in the water, slowly unfurling into the current. Overhead, a dragonfly schemes the surface and is gone in a shimmer of wings. You shift your weight, and your foot sinks a little deeper into the bank. A heron-like bird, though with a beak much longer and more needle-like than anything you've seen, wades near the shore, spearing something unseen beneath the water. For a moment, predator and prey trade places in your mind. The bird oblivious to the reptile in the shallows, the reptile uninterested in the bird's thin, bony frame. The quiet returns. The only sound now is the slow, patient gurgle of the river. The Sarcosuchus barely moves, and you feel that stillness pressing into you, making you part of the same long wait. The weather changes here without ceremony. There's no sharp shift in wind, No sudden darkening of the sky, just a gradual thickening of the air, a heaviness that seeps in until you notice your own breath feels damp. The river swells almost imperceptibly at first, the surface rising over roots and swallowing the neat edges of the bank. It's the flood season. Not the dramatic, foaming wall of water type you might picture, but a slow, creeping takeover. The shallows become deeper, and the deep spots blur into the forest floor. Before long, you're not even sure where the river ends and the land begins. Everything is a dull, brown soup. The Sarcosuchus doesn't seem to mind. If anything, it gains an advantage. With so much water, the boundaries vanish and prey animals lose their usual safe zones. The reeds that once formed tight walls are now partly submerged, their tips bobbing like they're reluctant to admit defeat. Mainstream historical fact. During the mid-Cretaceous, seasonal flooding in tropical wetlands was a major force in shaping ecosystems. These events redistributed nutrients, carved new channels, and created temporary lakes that could last months before drying up again. You pick your way through knee-deep water, feeling silt ooze up between your toes. Every step sends cloudy plumes curling outward, each one briefly visible before the current swallows it. Somewhere behind you, a branch cracks, but the sound is muffled, softened by the waterlogged air. Quirky tidbit. Fossilized fish and even dinosaur bones have been found in positions that suggest they were stranded in floodwaters, only to be buried in the settling silt. In other words, this slow, boring rise of water has been quietly claiming lives for millions of years without ever making headlines. Historians still argue whether these ancient floods were predictable enough for animals to plan around, or whether they caught even the largest predators off guard. Watching the Sarcosuchus now, its steady movements suggest it knows this routine by heart. You catch sight of one half-submerged, cruising along what used to be a game trail. Its snout breaks the surface like a misplaced log, nostrils flaring briefly before it slips forward again. It doesn't have to wait in one spot during floods. The water delivers opportunity directly to it. A group of small, prehistoric herbivores, something like knee-high, duck-billed dinosaurs, paddle awkwardly across the newly formed channel. Their short legs churn the water, and their eyes flick constantly toward every ripple. They make it to the other side without incident, but the Sarcosuchus drifts closer to where they entered, patient as ever. Rain begins to fall, not in sheets, but in heavy, slow drops that leave deep dimples in the surface. You watch the circles widen and merge until the whole river is a quilt of overlapping rings. The smell of wet vegetation swells, earthy and almost sweet. The flood doesn't rush you, but it insists on itself. Trees that stood proudly along the edge now have water lapping at their trunks. The chorus of insects changes pitch, as though adjusting to the thicker air. The whole place feels muffled, like the sound has been wrapped in wet cloth. You follow a side channel, where the current is just enough to carry leaves and the occasional floating branch. A Sarcosuchus head rises briefly in the distance, then sinks again without a ripple. You realize it could be anywhere in this brown haze, and you'd never know until it decided to reveal itself. That's the unsettling part. Floods erase the map. Yesterday's safe path is today's ambush zone. A sunny patch from the morning is now under a meter of silt-laden water. The light dims as the clouds thicken overhead. You feel the pressure drop, not enough to signal a storm, but enough to make the air cling to your skin. The Sarcosuchus glides through this drowned forest with the same unhurried certainty it always has. Flood or drought, clear water or murky soup, it belongs to all of it. You'd think two apex predators meeting in the same stretch of water would result in drama. Snapping jaws, a spray of water, maybe a decisive bite. But the truth is far duller, and in its own way, far more tense. The Sarcosuchus you've been watching isn't alone here. The first sign is a shadow, long and deliberate, sliding just beneath the surface parallel to the bank. At first, you think it's another of the same kind, until it lifts its head. The snout is shorter, the eyes set a little differently, the ridges along its skull forming a shape you don't recognize. This is a different predator altogether, something that clearly shares the water but not the exact same playbook. Mainstream historical fact. The Cretaceous wetlands of what's now North Africa weren't ruled by a single species. Alongside Sarcosuchus lived other large crocodiliforms, as well as fish-eating theropods like Spinosaurus, all competing for overlapping resources but rarely clashing head-on. The two glide past each other with a kind of studied disinterest, each keeping just enough distance to signal they're not looking for trouble. You realize this is their version of politics. No roars, no chases, just a silent agreement to maintain invisible borders. Quirky tidbit: modern Nile crocodiles sometimes share basking spots with other species of crocodilians, seemingly without conflict, as long as there's enough space. The ancient river may have had similar unspoken lounge rules. Historians still argue whether such predators actively avoided one another or simply didn't waste energy on unnecessary fights. Watching this moment, you'd bet on the latter. Neither of these reptiles looks the least bit afraid, but neither is willing to waste the calories on proving dominance. One slides toward a log near the far shore, hoisting itself out of the water with slow, deliberate movements. The other remains submerged, only its eyes and nostrils visible, drifting like a forgotten branch. The water between them is calm, but it feels like a line neither will cross. A large fish breaks the surface near the middle, the splash drawing both sets of eyes. Neither moves. The fish flounders, rights itself, and disappears again. Maybe both predators are too well fed today. Or maybe each is waiting for the other to move first. You find yourself holding still too, as if your own motion might break whatever equilibrium they've established. Even the insects seem quieter here, as though unwilling to interrupt. A pair of smaller Sarcosuchus juveniles emerge from the reeds downstream, keeping well away from both adults. They cut through the water at a diagonal, bypassing the invisible tension line entirely. You can almost sense the relief when they slip into the shadow of a sunken tree. The air is warm, but the stillness makes it feel heavier. Somewhere far off, you hear the faint call of a bird, the sound stretched thin by distance and humidity. The two predators remain in place, one basking in the open, the other watching from the water, each content to let the other exist so long as they keep their distance. It's not a scene that would make the cover of a wildlife documentary, but it's the truth. Survival here is often more about avoiding unnecessary risks than chasing cinematic moments. The afternoon heat has shifted from tolerable to oppressive, the air dense enough that every breath feels like you're sipping from a warm, damp cloth. Even the water looks sluggish now, its surface barely moving except where the breeze flicks it in short, half-hearted shivers. Out here, shade isn't just comfort, it's currency. The Sarcosuchus knows this. You watch as it slides along the bank, head low, eyes scanning, not for prey this time, but for the dark patch beneath an overhanging tree. The tree's roots dangle into the water like a curtain, trailing algae and catching drifting debris. Beneath them, the temperature will drop by just a degree or two, but in this heat, that's worth defending. Mainstream historical fact: many large reptiles, both ancient and modern, thermoregulate by alternating between basking in the sun and cooling in shade or water. For an animal the size of a Sarcosuchus, over 8 meters long in adulthood, finding the right microclimate could mean the difference between efficient digestion and overheating. The predator eases into the shadow and stops. This isn't lounging, it's claiming. You notice the way it positions itself so its body blocks the narrow entry between two roots. Anyone coming this way will have to pass within snapping range. Quirky tidbit: modern crocodiles have been seen chasing intruders out of prime basking spots, not for food, but simply because they wanted the real estate. Imagine a lizard version of a beach towel dispute. Historians still argue whether Sarcosuchus had strong territorial instincts like its modern cousins, or if it was more of a wanderer, taking advantage of whatever patch was open at the moment. Watching this, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in between, opportunistic when the shade is plentiful, but ready to defend it when it's scarce. From your angle, you can see another predator eyeing the same shaded space from a few meters away. It lingers just outside the darker water, motionless, only its eyes breaking the surface. A slow, deliberate approach, testing, gauging whether the current occupant is worth challenging. The Sarcosuchus doesn't move at first. Then, without warning, it swings its head toward the intruder in a single, deliberate arc. The movement sends a ripple outward, a silent don't. The other predator holds still for a long moment, then eases backward into the sunlit water and drifts away. The winner doesn't chase. It doesn't need to. In this heat, wasting energy would undo the whole point of securing the shade in the first place. Instead, it settles deeper under the overhang, nostrils barely above the surface, the rest of its massive body invisible in the gloom. From where you're standing, you can feel the difference. The air here is cooler, the smell of damp wood and algae stronger. Insects buzz at a lower pitch, and the water against your legs feels heavier, as if it moves slower in the shadow. The Sarcosuchus adjusts once, rolling just enough to let the cool current wash over its flanks. Then it goes completely still again, content in its victory, small as it may seem in the grand story of survival, but essential in the rhythm of a long, hot day. By the time the heat loosens its grip, the light has taken on that late afternoon softness, the kind that turns the water's surface into a slow-moving sheet of gold. You've wandered downstream a little, where the bank is firm enough to stand without sinking, and the air smells faintly of something acrid. You find the source easily enough. Along a muddy flat, a scatter of footprints, wide, splayed, pressed deep into the drying surface, leads from the water's edge to a patch of churned earth. Some are the telltale imprints of Sarcosuchus, broad pads, claw tips like shallow commas. Others are from creatures you can't identify at a glance, some three-toed, others round and flat. And then there's the less dignified evidence, a pale, crusted heap of dung, half dissolved by earlier rain. It's not glamorous, but you're looking at future science here. In a few million years, give or take, all of this could harden, bury, and fossilize, footsteps and droppings alike, into a permanent record of a completely ordinary afternoon. Mainstream historical fact. Trace fossils, things like footprints, nests, and coprolites, fossilized feces, can tell paleontologists as much, or more, than bones about an ancient animal's behavior and environment. They're snapshots of daily life that skeletal remains can't provide. You crouch to study one of the deeper prints. The edges are already drying, curling up into thin ridges. A tiny beetle trundles across it, completely unaware it's walking through what could one day be a prized museum specimen. The sun's low enough now to throw the impressions into sharp relief, every ridge and groove standing out in miniature shadows. Quirky tidbit. Paleontologists have found coprolites containing bits of bone, scales, and even plant matter, suggesting some predators weren't as picky as textbooks make them seem. In theory, you could piece together an ancient menu just by studying what got stuck in the digestive process. Historians still argue whether Sarcosuchus preferred certain parts of its habitat for basking and hunting, or if it simply left its marks wherever the day took it. Looking at the mess of tracks here, you could make a case for both. Some prints lead directly from water to shade, others wander in odd loops that go nowhere in particular. A breeze pushes across the flat, carrying with it the faint hum of distant insects and the sharper scent of algae baking in shallow pools. The prints are already less distinct than when you first saw them. One good overnight rain could erase them entirely. You realize how rare it is for any of these marks to survive long enough to fossilize, and how much luck is involved in their eventual discovery. Near the far edge of the flat, the Sarcosuchus itself emerges, slowly, like it's inspecting its own work. It pauses near one of the larger prints, then continues without a glance, sliding into the shallows and vanishing under the gold-tinted water. You stand alone with the footprints and the fading heat, knowing that in this moment there's still just mud and mess. The future will turn them into history, but for now, there's simply the everyday clutter of a predator's life. By morning, the air is different, thick with the kind of dampness that clings to your hair and clothes. The sky isn't gray, exactly, but the light feels muted, as if the sun is filtering through a veil. You can hear the rain before you feel it, a soft hiss moving over the water in a long, slow sweep. The river is already swollen from earlier storms, but now it's pushing past its usual boundaries with more insistence. Channels that were dry a week ago are filling, creeping over low banks and pooling in depressions. The edges of the forest blur into the river's body until you can't tell where one stops and the other begins. Mainstream historical fact. In the mid-Cretaceous tropics, extended rainy periods could last for weeks or even months, transforming river systems into sprawling floodplains. Entire networks of seasonal channels would appear, connecting habitats that normally stayed separate. The Sarcosuchus doesn't fight this change, it moves with it. You spot one drifting along a submerged forest edge, weaving between the trunks. Every so often it tilts its head upward, nostrils poking through the surface to draw in a slow breath before sinking again. Quirky tidbit. In modern floodplains, crocodilians have been seen following fish migrations into newly flooded areas, exploiting the sudden abundance. The water may look murky and still to you, but to the predator, it's a buffet on the move. Historians still argue whether ancient predators like this relied on instinct to find these temporary feeding grounds or if they learned specific seasonal routes over time. Watching it now, you can imagine both. The slow patience of an animal that knows the rains will deliver, paired with the memory of where those deliveries usually happen. You wade into a side channel, water up to your thighs, the bottom soft and shifting underfoot. The surface is littered with floating leaves, seeds, and the occasional drowned insect. A school of small fish flits around your legs, darting forward to snap at anything that might be food, then scattering again. The Sarcosuchus appears ahead of you, almost by accident, its ridged back just breaking the surface. It doesn't lunge or splash, it simply slides forward, the water parting in silence. A flick of its tail sends it drifting into a deeper pocket where the current slows to nothing. Here, you see why the rainy season isn't all abundance. The deeper you go, the less oxygen is in the water, and the still pockets reek faintly of decay. Plants rot where they stand, their stems collapsing into soft tangles. Somewhere under that mat of green, other things are dying too, things that won't be eaten before they vanish into the silt. The predator hovers in place, letting the current bring whatever it can. Every so often there's a ripple, maybe a fish bumping against its snout, maybe something smaller. You can't tell, and neither can the fish, until it's too late. The rain grows heavier, drumming on the surface hard enough to blur your vision. You can barely hear the insects anymore. The sound of the rain swallows everything else. The Sarcosuchus turns slowly, almost lazily, and lets itself be carried farther into the drowned forest. Out here, there's no straight path, just endless water and the dark shapes of trees, their roots drinking from a river that now owns them entirely. The rain stops as quietly as it began, leaving behind a thick, humid stillness that clings to your skin like a damp blanket. The floodwaters start to retreat, but not quickly, more like the slow exhale of a beast waking from a long sleep. Pools remain in low spots, the land pocked with pockets of stagnant water that reflect the cloud-heavy sky. This is the long hunger, the dry spells that stretch on until patience becomes its own survival skill. You trudge through the thick mud, each step sinking deeper than the last. It's exhausting, but rushing would be pointless here. You learn that fast in this world, energy is your most precious currency. Mainstream historical fact. During extended dry periods in the mid-Cretaceous, waterholes shrank and food became scarcer, forcing semi-aquatic predators to conserve energy and adapt their hunting strategies. You spot a small cluster of dried reeds bending over a cracked mudflat. The usual lush greens have faded to dull browns and grays. Even the insects seem quieter, their buzzing replaced by the occasional distant chirp of a lone bird. Quirky tidbit. Some modern crocodilians can survive for months without food by slowing their metabolism and conserving energy. It's likely that Sarcosuchus developed similar adaptations, though exactly how they managed this is still a topic of debate. Historians still argue whether these prehistoric predators migrated in search of water or simply hunkered down and waited out the dry seasons. From what you see, it seems more about mastering the art of waiting than embarking on desperate journeys. You find yourself near a shrinking pond, its edges crusted with mineral deposits. A juvenile Sarcosuchus lies half-buried in mud nearby, eyes barely open, conserving strength. It's a quiet surrender to the season's demands. No dramatic hunts, just the slow endurance of those who know the waiting game. The sun burns hotter, drying the cracked earth beneath your feet. You watch a dragonfly skim over a shrinking puddle, the surface tension holding for just a moment before breaking beneath its wings. This is the rhythm here, feast and famine, flood and drought, life paced by patience and slow resilience. You settle in alongside the predator, feeling the weight of waiting stretch out before you. The river's edge is quiet except for the faint rustle of movement nearby. You notice subtle signs, the faint splash of water, a low ripple across the surface, and realize the moment has arrived. It's courtship season, but don't expect any grand displays or flashy dances. This is a low-key affair, defined more by proximity than spectacle. You watch as two Sarcosuchus, one slightly larger, the other smaller, drift slowly toward each other. Neither rushes, neither hisses or bellows. Instead, they move with deliberate calm, noses just barely breaking the surface, eyes scanning but not quite locking. Mainstream historical fact. Fossil evidence suggests that crocodiliform courtship relied heavily on being in the right place at the right time, with less emphasis on aggressive competition than many modern predators. Quirky tidbit. Modern crocodilians sometimes synchronize their mating behaviors with the lunar cycle, a detail that's hard to verify in fossils but hints at a complex relationship between environment and reproduction. Historians still argue how much vocalization Sarcosuchus used during courtship, if at all. Watching these silent water dancers, you sense a communication beneath the surface, subtle gestures that only insiders understand. The pair floats in a slow circle, occasionally touching snouts like a shy handshake. You can almost imagine them exchanging signals. Tiny shifts in posture, slow head tilts, a gentle ripple of the water between them. The surrounding water is still except for the occasional ripple caused by small fish or insects. Dragonflies hover nearby, oblivious to the ancient romance unfolding beneath them. No dramatic fights, no loud declarations, just a patient, quiet ritual that ensures the species carries on. You realize that in this ancient world, survival isn't always about strength or speed. Sometimes it's about timing and the willingness to wait for a moment that most others overlook. Evening folds over the river, softening edges and muting colors into gentle shades of rust and slate. The heat finally loses its grip, and the water cools beneath the fading light. You find yourself settled near a bend where the current slows, and the air carries the faint scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. You watch as Sarcosuchus emerge from the shadows, its massive body moving with slow deliberation. It pauses at the water's edge, nostrils flaring as if tasting the evening air, then slides back into the river without a ripple. This is the shift from day to night, the time when the predator becomes most active. Mainstream historical fact. Evidence from fossilized trackways suggests that many large crocodiliforms, including Sarcosuchus, were likely crepuscular or nocturnal hunters, taking advantage of cooler temperatures and less competition. Quirky tidbit. Some modern crocodilians have been observed using moonlight reflections to ambush prey, a behavior that might trace back millions of years. Historians still argue how much light influenced hunting patterns in ancient wetlands. The exact role of twilight in shaping Sarcosuchus behavior remains open, but the evening certainly changes the pace. You notice small fish darting near the shore, their quick flashes disturbed by the occasional ripple from something bigger lurking below. The river's surface shimmers faintly in the dim light, hiding secrets just beneath. Insects hum low and steady, their chorus rising as darkness deepens. Fireflies, or their prehistoric equivalents, begin to flicker among the reeds, casting tiny sparks that dance on the edges of your vision. The Sarcosuchus remains motionless, a dark silhouette blending seamlessly with the water and shadows. It's the perfect stillness, waiting for the right moment when hunger outweighs caution. You settle back, the river's pulse syncing with your own breath, the slow rhythm of life in a world that's both alien and strangely familiar. Night deepens. The world around you softens into shades of blue and black, the river reflecting a sky dense with stars. The usual daytime chorus has faded into a quieter symphony, low croaks, the distant rustle of leaves, the gentle lapping of water against mud. Your eyes adjust, and you catch movement just below the surface. A Sarcosuchus navigating the inky depths with practiced ease. Its eyes gleam faintly, reflecting the starlight, but otherwise, it is nearly invisible. Mainstream historical fact. Many large reptiles, including Sarcosuchus, had adaptations allowing them to hunt effectively at night, such as specialized eyes sensitive to low light and sensory pits to detect vibrations in the water. Quirky tidbit: some crocodilians today can slow their heart rate drastically during dives, conserving oxygen for longer underwater hunts, a behavior that likely has ancient roots. Historians still argue how much Sarcosuchus relied on ambush versus active pursuit under cover of darkness. Observing this nighttime world, you realize both tactics might have been in play, depending on circumstance. The river's surface ripples as a fish darts out, triggering a reaction below. A sudden surge, a flash of teeth, and then stillness once more. The catch is swift and silent. You feel the weight of night pressing in, a velvet cloak that both hides and reveals. The predator moves with patience honed over millions of years, a ghost in a world that breathes slowly when the sun is gone. As your eyes drift over the water, you think about how little changes and how much does. The same river, the same hunger, yet every moment is unique, shaped by light, weather, and the delicate dance of survival. You let your breath slow, matching the rhythm of the darkened wetlands, the faint calls of distant creatures lulling you towards stillness. The night lingers, but you start to sense the first hints of dawn, soft, almost imperceptible shifts in the darkness. It's a slow unwinding, a quiet promise that the sun will return, and with it, the long, drawn-out dance of day and night begins again. The Sarcosuchus, too, seems aware of this subtle change. It pauses near a submerged log, nostrils barely breaking the surface, eyes half closed in a kind of patient waiting. The stillness here isn't emptiness, it's anticipation. Mainstream historical fact: early morning and late afternoon were likely the peak activity times for many large crocodiliforms, allowing them to avoid the midday heat while maximizing hunting opportunities. Quirky tidbit: some ancient crocodiliforms may have communicated through low-frequency sounds, rumbles and bellows that travel far in water but barely register on land. Whether Sarcosuchus did this is still a mystery, but the idea paints a vivid picture of a prehistoric soundscape. Historians still argue about how social Sarcosuchus was, whether these giants ever gathered in groups or lived mostly solitary lives. Watching the quiet morning, you sense a world where both could be true, depending on circumstance. A slight ripple interrupts the calm as a school of fish darts past. The predator flicks its tail once, adjusting position, but remains mostly still. Its eyes scan the shadows, alert but patient. You breathe in the damp, cool air, feeling the soft pulse of the river's current beneath your feet. The day is just waking up, slow and unhurried, ready to be shaped by the same ancient rhythms that have run here for millions of years. This moment, balanced between night and day, is a reminder that survival is as much about timing as it is about strength. You settle into the rhythm, ready for whatever comes next. The sun climbs steadily now, warming everything with an insistent glow that pushes out the last traces of dawn's cool. The river reflects the light like molten glass, its surface alive with flickers from darting fish and the occasional bird swooping low to catch a meal. The Sarcosuchus you've been following moves deliberately, muscles rippling beneath thick, armored skin. It's bigger now, older, slower, but no less commanding. Each step it takes sends soft ripples through the water, a quiet announcement of its presence in this ancient kingdom. Mainstream historical fact: Sarcosuchus is among the largest crocodiliforms ever discovered, reaching lengths over 11 meters and weighing several tons, a true titan of its time. Quirky tidbit: some fossils show bite marks from other Sarcosuchus, hinting at intraspecies conflict that probably wasn't pretty, but might have been necessary for establishing dominance. Historians still argue about how these giants interacted, whether they fought territorial battles often or largely tolerated each other with occasional displays. Your observations suggest a tense balance, where power is shown more through presence than violence. A sudden splash draws your attention. A fish leaps from the water, its silver body catching the sun before it disappears again. The Sarcosuchus lunges, jaws snapping shut with a sound muffled by the river. It's a quick success, but the predator doesn't linger. There's a purpose behind every motion here. Energy must be spent wisely, especially in a world where food is never guaranteed. You watch as the beast slips beneath the water, a slow, powerful movement that sends currents swirling in its wake. Above, dragonflies hover, their wings catching the light in a sparkling blur. The day is unfolding exactly as it has for millions of years, steady, relentless, and perfectly adapted to the rhythms of survival. The light shifts again, softer now, as the day edges toward evening. The river slows its endless song, the water's surface smoothing out like a calm breath after a long effort. You feel the weight of the day settling in, the same quiet tiredness you imagine in the Sarcosuchus resting somewhere just beneath the surface. The air cools, carrying hints of wet earth and fading sunlight. Insects buzz softly in the reeds, their rhythm slow and steady, almost like a lullaby. You follow the gentle murmur of the river, the current pulling everything downstream in a slow, unending journey. Mainstream historical fact. Fossil evidence suggests Sarcosuchus lived in river systems that changed dramatically with the seasons, forcing it to adapt to shifting water levels and prey availability over time. Quirky tidbit. Recent studies speculate some large crocodiliforms may have used their massive snouts to create low-frequency sounds, vibrations that traveled through the water to communicate or perhaps stun prey. A fascinating idea, though still debated. Historians still argue whether Sarcosuchus was primarily an ambush predator or if it sometimes chased prey actively. What this really means is that its hunting strategy was likely flexible, adapting to conditions and opportunity. As you watch the river in the fading light, the silhouette of a Sarcosuchus drifts slowly into view, almost a shadow now, part of the river itself. It moves without urgency, the day's hunt done or paused, conserving energy for what tomorrow will demand. You feel yourself begin to relax, the tension easing from your shoulders, the world around you growing quieter, softer, slower. 300-word wind down. Now, slow your breath and let the river's murmur fade into the background, carrying you gently away from this ancient place. Imagine the warm water wrapping around your ankles, the last glimmers of sunlight slipping beneath the horizon. There is a calm here that stretches across millions of years, a quiet persistence in the flow of time itself. You don't need to understand everything, just feel the steady pulse beneath the surface, the endless patience of the predator and the prey, locked in their eternal dance. Tomorrow will come with its challenges, but for now, there is peace. Let your eyes close softly, the sounds of the river mingling with your breath. The long history you've traveled tonight folds into the quiet dark, a story held gently between the past and what's next. Rest easy. Sweet dreams.